Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you an audio recording from the archives, which is an interview I did with Annie Kagan, the author of the book The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, a fascinating book about the life and death of her brother and the afterlife communications she has had with him. Very, very interesting. I think you'll really like this one. Be sure and subscribe to this channel down below. Also, subscribe or follow the podcast wherever you happen to listen. Leave a rating and review. And if you're able to chip in a few dollars of support by going to eoluniversity.com/support to find out how you can help keep the podcast on the air. So we'll move on with my conversation with Annie Kagan. And just as a disclaimer, this was recorded back in the old days when I didn't have the same recording equipment I have right now. So apologies in advance if the audio quality isn't quite what you're used to now, but I think you'll enjoy the content anyway. So here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to End of Life University podcast, where we share real talk about life and death. I'm your host, as always, Dr. Karen Wyatt, and I'm glad you've joined me here for episode number 226. Today, I'm going to be talking with author Annie Kagan about her book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And we'll be getting into that in just a few moments, but I have a couple of announcements for you. One is I have the reading list available for 2020 for my online reading group, A Year of Reading Dangerously. If you're new to my work or new to this podcast, you may not have heard about it, but I'm sponsoring a reading group where we read one book a month about death, grief, or the afterlife. And from time to time, I'm able to interview the authors of the books and ask your questions of the author and get them answered. So that's something that may be coming up in the next year. And I'll leave a link where you can sign up for the reading group. You could on the show notes, eolupodcast.com, episode 226. You can go there and find a link to sign up for it. You can also go to the website, eoluniversity.com, and you'll see a link there. And you can sign up if you'd like to get an email once a month letting you know about the latest book we're reading, and also to be informed if there's any kind of a Q&A session or discussion about the book going on. I did want to mention that my supporters on Patreon will all automatically be informed about the reading group books that we're reading through Patreon. I'll post them every month for you on Patreon. And also you will get priority access to any interviews or Q&A sessions that I schedule. And sometimes the patrons on Patreon will be the only people who get to hear those interviews. So I did want to share my interview today with Annie Kagan is one that I did for the book, the reading group, A Year of Reading Dangerously in 2019, about her book, because it's one of the books that we read this past year. And I'm sharing that with you today so that you can get an idea of the conversation we have and how we dive into the content of some of these books in order to learn things we need to know, or maybe stretch our boundaries a little bit about topics, especially things like the afterlife that we're discussing today. I hope you will listen through this entire episode here to my conversation with Annie, even if you're someone who's skeptical or doesn't believe in the afterlife, because Annie has a lot of wisdom to share that she learned from her brother Billy after he died. And it's life wisdom that all of us can benefit from, whether you believe in the afterlife or not. So I hope you will take a listen and see what you think. And I'd like to thank my two newest supporters on Patreon, Michelle Scott and Marjorie Williams. Thanks so much for signing up. And if you'd like to join our team and get special bonuses like the end of life news every month, like movie reviews and priority access to A Year of Reading Dangerously reading group, go to patreon.com/EOLU. thanks again to everyone who's been supporting me for the last couple of years. I really appreciate it. So now we'll move on with my conversation with Annie Kagan about her book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And stay tuned after this interview is done, and I'll be back with a few takeaways and to say goodbye. Here we go. Today, I'm very happy to welcome my guest, Annie Kagan, who is the author of the book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. And I'm just so excited to talk to Annie about this book. I chose the book for our online reading group, A Year of Reading Dangerously, because I felt like it was really the perfect introduction to the afterlife, possibly for some people who might never have considered it before, or really thought about what the afterlife might be like. I felt like the book was a perfect representation through Billy's eyes of what he was experiencing in the afterlife, and then also through Annie's eyes about the experience of having a loved one sharing with her what was happening in the other world. So Annie, thank you for writing this book, and then thank you also for taking time out with me today to talk about it.
Oh, thank you for having me, Karen.
And as I said, I loved the way you presented in the book and talked about your own experience and what you were going through as Billy was communicating with you, and then sharing his words in his voice perfectly as well. It was a very nice contrast. And I was wondering, was that Billy's idea that you share both your experience and his words?
Actually, no. What happened was my brother died, and several weeks after his death, he began talking to me from the other side. And I thought I was going a little bit crazy and that my imagination was just kind of making it up to make me feel better about his death. But he knew that I felt that way, and he said that he was going to give me proof that he was real and that I really was speaking with another dimension. And he did. He gave me a lot of proof, and the proof got more and more convincing as time went on. And when I first started to write his words, I had no intention. First of all, I really had no intention of publishing the book. I thought it was a big joke, and because he would say, "Oh yeah, we're going to do a book." I'm like, "Sure." And I really did not want to put myself into it. But I had a friend who was a publisher, and an editor, and she said to me, "You really need to talk about your own experience so that the reader can identify with you, and just it's like you take their hand and take them along with you on the journey." So I started to record, my own, what I was going through as well. And that's how the back and forth happened.
Well, it was very effective, because that's exactly how it felt as a reader, to be able to identify with you and even identify with the doubts you had and the uncertainty. And yet these messages from Billy were just so powerful and compelling that were coming through. And it was nice to be right there with you on that journey.
Thank you so much.
And I was wondering, Annie, before this communication happened with Billy, what was your own understanding of the afterlife, or did you have one before this happened?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the more I look at my life and my experiences, the more I see how my life kind of guided me to write the book. So when I was a little girl, my father, his parents died when he was very young, and when they were very young, and he thought he was going to die young, and he loved me very much. So he was always preparing me for his death. So, in a lot of houses, people don't talk about death. We talked about death in my house a lot. And my father would tell me that, he wasn't really going to die. He was going to go on someplace and he was going to build us a white house with a swimming pool, and he would be waiting for me. So I didn't have this big fear of death. And then the other really interesting thing is that my father told me that he always spoke to his parents. And I thought he meant he was having imaginary conversations with his parents in his head. My mother would say this, my father. But actually, I learned later on when he was dying that he was having in his mind, actual conversations with his parents. So when he was dying, he would say to me, my mom's outside the door and she's saying this, and my father is doing this, and my brothers, because his brothers were dead. And that was very interesting to me. And when he actually did die, I was very, very crushed. And he had left me a tape that he made when he was alive for me to play after he passed. And while I was at his funeral, I heard his voice. I didn't actually hear it, but I kind of heard it saying, in the tape, I'm going to tell you that no matter where I am, I'm around you. And sure enough, that was on the tape. That was the main theme of the tape. So that was my first taste of, that's interesting. But other than that, I had no conceptions of what happens after you die.
But it's interesting that it sounds like at least you had an open mind about it, which might have been helpful, because I would imagine some people might have completely rejected the whole idea, might have heard Billy's voice and shut it out and decided, nope, that's crazy. I don't want that to happen. But it sounds like you at least were open to it.
Right. I mean, having my father talk about death from when I was a little girl in a very positive way, it wasn't a secret. It wasn't like, oh, we can't talk about death. We talked about death quite a bit. So I've never been afraid of the subject.
Yeah, which I think that's a really important point to make, because I do hear people who wish that they would have the experience you did, that they wish a loved one would contact them from the other side, but at the same time they're a little bit frightened of that happening and a little frightened of the whole idea of death. And so there's a mixed message there that may interfere with them actually even being able to have that kind of experience.
Well, one thing I want to say about that, because I think it's really important for people to understand, is that like a lot of people will tell me that they envy me, right? Like, oh, I wish that would happen to me. But I just want to be honest about how difficult the experience was for me, because first of all, I believe that this is the longest after-death communication that's ever been recorded, right? So for those who haven't read the book, it goes really deep into the realms of the afterlife and different levels. And when Billy would talk to me, I would actually felt like I went with him, right? Mm. But when I came back, it was really difficult. Like, everything seemed so dense, and dealing with everyday realities was not that easy. And I had actually prepared for it without knowing it, because I did this thing that I had never expected, but I met a teacher, and the teacher taught us to meditate, and I actually meditated 3 hours a day for 5 years before this
Wow.
happened. And that's a really intense experience, something also that led me to this that I never in my whole life, thought that I would do, but I did it, and that enabled me to hear like the voice from another frequency. But also, I really also want to stress that it wasn't because Billy loved me so much. It wasn't that special kind of thing. It was that he really had a mission to do, and I had my end of the mission to do. And he really did it not for me, but for everybody. So, for example, like my mom is on the other side, and she doesn't talk to me, but I feel her around, and that's good enough. And it's even more loving than it is with Billy. So I want to say it wasn't so easy. So don't envy me.
That's such a good point, that on the one hand, you had done a lot of work for several years previously, which made you open to the communication. And then Billy himself had a very compelling reason for connecting with you, which was the book. And
Yes.
so there has to be work on both sides in a sense, and there has to be a way for the connection to happen, but a reason for it also, and maybe even a bigger reason, like this book was Billy's big reason for wanting to connect with you multiple times over and over again and take you on this journey.
Billy, all his life, for those who don't know, Billy had a lot of difficulty with drug addiction, and Billy had a very varied life. He was homeless. He lived in New York City in a multi-million-dollar condo. He ran a drug center. I mean, the contrasts in his life were more than most people had. But the one constant that he had in his whole life was he always wanted to help people. He always cared deeply for people, and this book is now in 19 different languages, which is amazing. And I get emails from all over the world every day thanking me, which really moves me, about different things. A parent who lost a child, and the book is the only thing that made them feel better. Someone with drug problems saying that they read the book and they don't feel bad about themselves anymore, or someone who has an illness. Like there are things in the book that I don't really understand and that I couldn't have made up. And I just feel like Billy is reaching from the other side to really assist people. It's not really about my communication with him so much. It's more about that now that I'm not writing the book, right? We have a different relationship now. But the book was really for everybody. It wasn't really for me.
And it's true, I've heard feedback from the readers in our reading group that many of them found a great deal of comfort from the book. And so, and I think I was going to mention that for me, I found also the fact that you were honest about feeling some guilt about the fact that before Billy died, you hadn't really been in contact with him for a while. And I experienced that with a cousin of mine who died unexpectedly, and I had turned down a chance to go have coffee with her. I hadn't seen her for a couple of years, but I was in her town, but I was too busy, so I didn't go visit her and go have coffee with her. And then she died a few months later, and the book made me realize how much I carried around that guilt of, why did I do that to her? Why did I not see her? But I don't know what it felt like to you, but it really seems like Billy just had there was just no blame or no concern
No.
whatsoever
Oh,
on his part.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I felt terrible because I hadn't saved him. And I get emails all the time, and when somebody dies, for some reason we all have guilt. Like there's always this feeling of I could have done better. I'll never forget this lovely woman wrote to me and she said, my husband was sick for 4 years and I did everything for him, but sometimes I really resented him. And I feel so guilty for having those feelings. And I'm like, oh no, no, no. That's just human. And also, when the person passes to the other side, the only thing that remains really from their end is love, right? They don't look at what we could have done, what we should have done. They're just love now. And there's no guilt, there's no blame, and as a matter of fact, that's what they want us to know. They want us to be happy. They want us to know that we'll meet them again. And it's a very human thing to feel that guilt, to feel that, oh, I could have done better. I'll never forget there was a moment in the book where I talk about, it's like about halfway through the book where, I don't know, Billy was talking about something and I started to cry because it reminded me of, my failures in taking care of him. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. I think I was mad at him because I was trying to help him with his drug problem and I was getting ill and I had to take some time off. And he said, well, you're saying that you hope that I forgive you, but maybe the real question is, do you forgive me? Right?
Mm.
And I think there are a lot of people who are relatives of people who have addiction problems, and also people who have addiction problems. But after death, there is none of this guilt stuff. It's the only thing that's left really on their side of things is the love.
That's so beautiful. And that reminds me, I had one person write to me whose father died within the last few months, and she asked the question, when will I know that he's okay? When will I get a sign that he's okay? And I felt her pain so much of, we sit here on this side of things and there's so much that we can't see and that we don't understand and don't know. And as you said, from our human perspective, we're trying to make sense of it all. And I think most of us do feel somewhat desperate. If only I could see that sign, if only I had that word or had something that would tell me everything's okay. But I wanted to ask it. It felt to me like Billy wanted to write this book because he's speaking to all of us who have those questions and to all of us who long for the sign, that what Billy communicated is the sign. Do you see it that way?
I see it that way, absolutely. And I feel like because of my meditation, because of his experience of life, which was so vast, and because my father, somehow I think it was inherited that, and I've learned that sometimes it's inherited, being able to speak to the other side because my father was able to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel that Billy did this for everybody, and I so don't expect anybody to believe me because they don't know me. They don't know how honest I am. It's just my experience that I'm writing about. But I will say that, I kept doubting my experience for a year. It was I would have the experience and then the proof, and I would know while the experience was going on that it was real. And then afterward, my mind would kick in, right? Because we have our minds, like, and I would think, how could I be talking to another dimension? This is crazy. It's like I'm making this up, right? And there comes a point in the book. There was a point in the book, Mahler's Eighth Symphony, where Billy was describing where he was in the afterlife, and he was describing this music he was listening to, and what they were saying in the music. And then he said to me, just like Mahler's Eighth Symphony. And when he said that, it was like being hit by a bolt of lightning, because I had never heard, I didn't even know that there was a Mahler's Eighth Symphony. And it was so intense that I went outside and I took a walk. I had to prepare myself. And I came back and I found it on YouTube. And Karen, it was exactly as he described it. It was chorus mysticus. It was a part of Mahler's Eighth. The singing was the same. The words meant the exact same thing. And at that moment, I knew 100% for sure that this was real. This was absolutely happening. And actually, I made friends with someone later on who's a nuclear physicist and also a religious scholar. And, he would go through the book and he would pick different parts and he'd go, oh yeah, well here, this is quantum physics over here, and here this is like an ancient sacred text of this and that. And then he said that the analogy for being real is that if you had a big sack filled with letters, right, and you randomly pulled the letters out of the sack, once in a while you might spell a word, but you're never going to make a perfect paragraph. And that's what Billy's proofs were like. They were like perfect paragraphs. And I think that my advice to people who really want to feel that connection with their loved ones, and I could completely understand it. I know when my dad died, I read Life After Life by Raymond Moody, and I was so relieved by all these stories of, near-death experiences. And then later on, he actually wrote the foreword to my book. So I was extremely excited by that. But I think that the best way to feel a connection is to speak to your loved one as though they can hear you, because they can. And just see if you feel the energy. And the other thing is, if you feel something, dare to believe it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my friend, her aunt died, and she really wanted, it was her favorite aunt. It was just like her mother, and she really, really, really wanted to connect with her aunt. And I said, look, just talk to her. Just talk to her as if she can hear you, and ask her for a sign. And she did. And my friend loves a good sale, right? She just loves to get things on sale. So she went out one day, and everything was on sale, and she even went to a cash register, and she was I don't know, the 40th person that day, and the bells went off, and she got she got all these items, and she came home and she was so excited. She said, oh my God, I know that was my aunt, because she knows how much, she just felt it, and she dared to believe it. Another friend of mine was talking to her father, and then she had this feeling that her father was smiling and jumping up and down. It's just talk and then believe. Don't pull everything apart. Don't pull the magic out of it. You don't have to be as scrupulous as I was, because I was writing a book and I was going to put it out in public, and I had to make sure that I was telling the truth. It was really important to me. It was like I could never represent something so important without having a real certainty that this was a genuine experience. But other people, they have the luxury of just go with the experience. Just go with the experience.
And I loved it that you portrayed that so well in the book, dealing with your own doubts. And then the way that Billy responded to your doubts and the signs that he showed you and how you described them, it was very nice as a reader to just go through that process with you, and to even find, if I'm experiencing doubt while I'm reading the book, I'm able to read about the signs that you were given that helps me open my mind and be more accepting of what I'm reading about too.
Right, and that's why Billy did it. Like, as he was convincing me, he was convincing the reader. And also, I would say, like, who could make this? I say to people, who could make this up? If you think I could make this story up, you got to really look at the story. Like, no one can make this story up. It's too complicated. Do you know what I mean? Like, the proofs were so strange. Like, like at one point he's telling me a prayer that he's receiving the afterlife, and he goes like, Hotep, Hotep, and I'm like, what's Hotep? And he tells me to look it up, and it turns out to be like a part of an Egyptian prayer for the dead while he's partaking in the eternal something or other. You'd have to be like a real genius to make this story up. It's too difficult. And also, one of the things that convinced me is I'm a lot more serious than Billy is. Like, I was always the studious one, and he was always more friendly and outgoing and funny, and even though it's a book about death, it's actually funny, and he's funny, and the people who know him, it's his voice. It sounds just like him. It doesn't sound like me. And I don't have the level of wisdom that he has either. Although I've learned a lot from him, I could never say the things that he does about, how to be happy on earth or what's happening to him. And so for me, I know it's true, but I think people should pick the book apart and really look at it critically and see what you think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you mentioned the wisdom that Billy shared that was sometimes beyond your wisdom or what you already knew. And I was curious to know if that wisdom has changed your life in any way.
Oh, yeah, many ways. The book has really changed my life. One of the things he says in the book is, see life through your own eyes, not through the lens of others. And I think throughout the whole book, Billy encourages us to become our own authority. There's so much propaganda out in the world. There are so many people wanting to tell you how life is, how to do this, how to cure that, why you're sick, why you're well. We're like barraged by information, especially now with the internet. And it's really important to be your own master, to look at things and to see if you think they're true, if you think they're false. And as you do that, it's so much easier to navigate life when you trust yourself. And the more you make decisions for yourself, the more you learn to trust yourself. And you also learn that there are many things you don't know. And that's a big, big part of life, is living in the mystery of life. Life is a mystery, and there's so many things that we don't know and that we don't understand. And now I find that to be something that's very beautiful, that I don't have to know why everything happened to me, or there are so many theories out there. Like when I used to be a chiropractor, and as a doctor, I'm sure you've experienced this, that all the theories that you've created your own disease and you could cure yourself of everything, and in my experience, it's just not true. Sometimes if you don't eat well, or you don't take care of yourself, but disease is also a mystery. We're not 100% sure. We don't know why things happen, and I think it's good to live with that mystery instead of making up belief systems that could wind up kind of driving you crazy. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I so resonate with that as a doctor, what you were saying, and kind of the lack of awareness of the mystery within medicine, which tries to standardize everything and create protocols. And, oh, you have these symptoms, so you fit into this box. And I rebelled against that so strongly, because I never found one patient who fit the perfect description of this illness or that illness. And I was constantly having to just throw away everything that I'd been taught and sit with that person and listen to all their stories. Tell me your story. Tell me what you've learned. Tell me what you know about this. And that seemed to me to be the only way to really get anywhere and to understand what was happening.
Oh, that's really beautiful. And I think that part of the problem is that the patient expects the doctor to know everything, and that there's an answer for everything, and then the doctor kind of pretends to know everything, and so there's this game going on. Well, really, the body is a mystery, and I really don't believe that people just create things with their negative thoughts. I mean, for me, that doesn't work, because I know plenty of negative people who aren't sick, and plenty of wonderful, positive people who are sick. It's just mysterious, and I think I love living in the mystery. I love living in a beautiful day, and just not having to know everything is an enormous relief. So that's something that Billy has taught me, that I do not have to know everything, and neither do you.
And not having to be perfect either, because I love the fact that Billy wasn't necessarily a saint in his lifetime. You described him as a bad boy, and I think that's perfect. He endured certainly a great deal of suffering while he was alive here. And I think that shows us that the fact that we have suffering in our lives doesn't mean that we're good people or bad people. It's part of life. And it doesn't mean either that someone who suffers now is going to have a negative afterlife experience because
oh my God, not at all.
Life, there's no connection to that. In fact, maybe those of us who suffer the most learn the most, and maybe that's part of it. We learn about this mystery as we go.
Yes, Billy would say to me, when you have a really hard time, you're not studying simple math, you're studying calculus. And people get really mad that Billy's not suffering in the afterlife. I have to tell you that's one of the big criticisms of the book, is that, well, he was a drug addict and he hurt people and he should be suffering, But the thing is, we don't really understand the path that anybody goes on, or why they go on that path, or what they're learning, or our own paths, So when difficult things happen, we tend to judge ourselves. And one of the biggest criticisms is that Billy says that after you die, you view your life in a very detached way, and you see everything, and you understand everything you've done, and you get to do it different. But the difference in what Billy says than a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, right, which is a different thing, because Billy is actually on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
People who have near-death experiences kind of die, their heart stops, but they come back, right? And they report that they do life review, but they feel pain when they've hurt other people. Billy contradicts that. Billy says, in the atmosphere of the afterlife is so loving that what we call God or the Supreme Source is so loving, way beyond anything that the human can imagine, that it's not capable. You're not capable. You can't feel pain in that atmosphere. It's too loving. So you learn from your life, but you're not suffering because you did this or that. And I can't tell you how controversial that is. That is just, people have said to me, you can't say that to people. They'll go crazy. I'm like, oh, you mean the only reason people are nice to each other is because they're afraid of punishment after they die? Really? Like, if we weren't afraid of punishment after we die, we'd all go crazy? What about, our souls? So I would say of all the things I've gotten the most feedback, negative feedback about that, including from people, in the field. Like, oh, how could Billy be a drug addict and not be suffering? Oh, yeah, because there is no suffering in the afterlife. There's only love and understanding. It's not run by human beings.
Yeah, and it makes sense to me. Guilt and fear and suffering and pain are part of this world where we live. And that's why that's all we can see. And so people who have a near-death experience come back and they have to interpret what they experience through that same lens of guilt and fear and suffering, because that's how we're able to view the world in our experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful way to put it. And also, people get mad at me, but I didn't make it up. It's like,
yeah, I was going to say
I
that.
didn't invent, I didn't invent the system. So,
yeah,
and
you're
also
not responsible for
when you die, according to Billy, it's your soul that goes on, and your soul is the part of you that's all good. It's like the part of you that did, quote, bad things doesn't really go on with you. Those are just like thought forms. I, as a human being, would love to see certain people be punished in the afterlife. I would, truthfully, I would. Like, if someone hurts me, I want to think, or if somebody, is a tyrant and kills millions of people or is responsible, I would love to think, oh, yeah, that person, But that's not what has been reported to me. Whether I'm right or wrong, I can't say, but it's just a different It's the difference of being in the ocean and the air. It's just a completely different atmosphere.
And it seems to me that your job in writing this book was to be a faithful recorder or stenographer, in a way, to take down what Billy told you without filtering it through your own judgment or your ideas or experience, but just to record his words and let them stand for what they are. And it seems like you did a very good job of that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I recorded everything exactly as he said. Sometimes he would repeat. The only editing I did was repetition. Like sometimes he'd repeat an idea over, 3 times, and I would edit that out. But actually, I wouldn't even let the publisher edit his words. Nobody touched Billy's words because they were Billy's words. And as a matter of fact, I went with a smaller publisher because the other publisher wanted to change things. And so I had to be really loyal to report what he said, and that was my job, and it was a job. It was a hard job, and Billy was very he really drove me. He made me work very, very hard, right?
Yeah.
And actually, he used to joke around because we had a very difficult relationship, actually, because I was always the good one and he was always the bad one, and I was always the one, getting A's, and he was the one getting suspended from school. And I was a lot younger than him, and it didn't make for a wonderful relationship. And then after he died, he would joke around with me a lot and say, "Oh, now I'm really glad you're the smart one. Now I'm really glad you're diligent. I'm sorry for putting you down and torturing you all those years."
Because now he finds out he needed you as a partner to help create this book.
Exactly. So that's one of the things that Billy does a lot now, because he still speaks to me, but we're not writing a book. And I can't say what's going to happen in the future, but I don't think we're going to. But actually, if you pick up the book 6 months after you read it, it actually is almost like a different book, people report. It's like different things jump out at you. But what Billy does a lot now is he jokes around with me because I'm overly serious, right? And so he'll do funny little things or make a joke, or and his big theme, I'll share with everyone, that he tells me is enjoy yourself as much as possible and suffer as little as you can.
I like that.
Yeah, I like it too.
And bringing home the idea that a lot of our suffering we create ourselves in our own minds. And if we can just get over that and find something to enjoy in every experience, we can have a pretty pleasant life.
Yes, and not having all these other layers of, I guess, like Billy says, like, there's salt and pepper and oregano. There's all kinds of different flavors and tastes. And so when you're sad, it's okay to just be sad. When you're happy, be happy. But don't compare yourself to others. That's a big cause of suffering. Don't think things should be other than they are. Because that's probably not true. I often look out at the universe and the stars, and then my problems seem so much smaller, right, compared to the vastness of everything. So many of the things, that we worry about, they're really not important. I mean, there are important things and difficult things, but so many of the things that we think about, they're not really important. that's what he reminds me. He'll say, is it really important that such and such, such and such's book is doing so much better than yours when, when yours is better than theirs? I mean, I don't know what to say. Or that that they're not telling the truth, because sometimes people don't tell the truth in books. And I have kind of being in the industry, I have a kind of a viewpoint of some people who are telling the truth and some people who aren't telling the truth, and like, is it really important? So he's helped me learn to let go of a lot of stuff.
That's really beautiful, and definitely all of us need to learn that lesson.
Yes. And another really important lesson, because he talks a lot in the book about self-love, that self-love is so important to really learn to love yourself. So people will ask me, like, well, what does he mean by that? What is self-love? And the conclusion I've come to is that it's different for everybody. And it's a great exploration, learning what it is for you. Like, what does it mean to love yourself for you? And it's such an important thing to learn on this plane. Like, what can you do to love yourself more? How can you find your self-love that's already there? And one of the things is really just don't compare yourself to anyone, because there's such a false note in that, because you really don't know the other person or what their life is really like or what it's like to be them. So it's good not to compare, and it's good to just tell yourself good things about yourself all the time.
Yeah, and to foster that self-love and to escape from comparing ourselves with others, we have to, in many ways, step out of our social conditioning and what we're being told. We're almost being bombarded with these messages of, look at these people. Don't you wish you were like them? Don't you wish you were as attractive or
Oh
old
my
like they are,
God.
or had the success that they have? I think we hear those messages constantly, so we have to intentionally remove ourselves from that mindset.
Yes, and like, I happen to know, like, Facebook is such a difficult thing for so many people. I've had 4 shrinks tell me now that their business has increased since Facebook. Like, people come to their sessions and talk about Facebook because everybody posts these pictures of how happy they are and how great their life is, and oftentimes it's not really true, right? I remember somebody who was constantly posting these pictures of what she was doing with her boyfriend and how happy they were. And actually, her boyfriend was really the friend of mine. I didn't know her. And I'm like, wow, they have a phenomenal life. Look at this. I don't know. I'm not that happy. It's like, wow, they're so happy. And then I finally got to meet them, and the entire time she complained to me about him. It was so bizarre. And I said, you know what? I'm never going to believe anything again, because it's all like propaganda, right? And so
It's so true.
you just have to stop thinking what's going on with other people, and just what another thing that Billy says is, like, just focus on the things that you like. It's so easy for the human mind, and there was a reason for it, right, to pick up the negative things in the environment because it was part of the fight or flight reflex. So you had to be hyper aware of the things that are wrong. So you have
Yeah.
to train yourself to pay attention to all the happy things and all the things that you like. And you know what? After a couple of days of doing that, you'll feel a lot better.
So true. So true. And the things in your own life, in your own awareness and existence that you love, not things that you see outside of you that you feel you don't have. I love it, but someone else has it, and I wish I had that. Just what do you have? What's here right now for you? And I so resonate with that message. Love whatever it is that you have right now.
Yes, and also really deeply know that you don't know what that other person's experience is. You really don't know what that other person's experience is. And you're not really standing in their shoes. And everyone has their ups and downs in life. Everyone does. But we do, as you said, live in a society that's like all our lives are like a commercial, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is to just get us to not feel good about ourselves and buy things or do things or go to the latest guru who will tell you, you know, how to live better, how to do better. There's a whole industry dedicated to telling people how to feel better. So the best way to feel better is to become your own authority and live your own life and learn how to just love yourself. Just love yourself. You know, that's another thing Billy does. He always tells me to tell myself. He said, tell yourself you're a brilliant creative genius. Tell yourself tell yourself that all day long. Just say, you know what? I'm a brilliant creative genius. And it's really nice. Everybody should do that. I
I
highly
like
recommend it.
I like it. Well, I was wondering, based on your experience hearing from Billy from the other side and everything you've learned from it, would you encourage people to use mediums to help them connect with the other side? How do you feel about that? If there's a kind of an intermediary person helping someone communicate, any thoughts about that?
Well, I think that you should only go to somebody who you can kind of think is trustworthy by maybe asking around for someone who's had a really good experience, because today with the internet there could be a lot of people looking other people up to see names and circumstances. Some people it makes them feel very happy. I think that the thing that people feel the most happy about is when a medium will tell you something that nobody could know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, your mother's talking about, you know, the little red dress she bought you when you were 3 years old. That's very expansive for the person because they know that their mother is there really saying that, because no one could know that. But I think you should be very, very careful about trying to get good references, trying to get I once saw something so sad. I was at a conference, and this very well-known psychic was talking to someone, and the woman had lost a child, and he was almost like badgering her. It was like, well, do you know a Robert? And she'd go, no, and then he'd go, Robin? She'd go, no, and he'd go, well, you must know a Robin, you know. So I would be cautious, and I would go to somebody someone you know had a really good experience with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Beware, and especially if you're grieving and vulnerable anyway, be cautious with who you trust.
Be cautious, and also I would say, don't be afraid of grieving. Like, I really grieved. Okay, like my entire immediate family is on the other side, right? And each time my grief was really intense. So when my father died, I was so bad. When Billy died, even though he was talking to me and it helped, I grieved. And my mom died after Billy died, and I was really pretty ill, from I mean it was just like my heart was hurting. But on the other hand, I feel like because I grieved, I'm fine now. And I have such fond memories of all of them where I know people who like never get over it. You know what I mean? So I think it's good to grieve. I think it is a big loss, even though I know I'll see them on the other side. They're not here. And I don't think one should be afraid of their grief. I think it's natural, and I think it's actually a healing process. At least that's been my experience.
And that makes sense. Grief is part of our human journey here. It's part of what we're doing here on this planet. So we need to be able to go through it.
And grief is a form of love, right? Like if you didn't
Mm-hmm.
love them so much, you wouldn't miss them so much. One thing that I did that really helped is every morning. Let's see, I started this when my dad died. Every morning for a year, I lit a candle for him, and I said something to him. And I didn't leave the candle burning because I didn't want it to burn the house down. But I did that every single morning for a year, and it really, really helped me. It was like a formal grieving period, and I did the same with Billy, and I did the same with my mom. And I found it was really good. And then the year was up, and I don't know. Now I really feel them all. I feel healed of my grief. I mean, I miss them, but I love them, and mostly I have all my good memories of them now.
I love that. I love honoring your grief in that way and not running away from it.
No, I couldn't run away from it. It was very powerful. It's a very powerful emotion, and it's okay. That's what I tell people all the time. It's natural. It's okay. It's okay to feel destroyed. You know what I mean? And it really is. It's just part of the human experience, and I think you can go through it.
Well, gosh, I'm having so much fun. This is such a great conversation, Annie. But
I'm enjoying you as well.
I wanted to get to a couple of reader questions so that I don't neglect those. But one reader wanted to know, does Billy have recommendations on how folks can listen more clearly to those trying to communicate with us from the other side?
Yes. Look at a picture and talk to them. Okay? You, instead of waiting for them to talk to you, open the line of communication by your speaking to them. And talk to them as if they can hear you, because they can. And I think that that's very comforting if you do it sincerely and with no expectation in return, and to be open to the signs. There's a great book written by a friend of mine, Bill and Judy Guggenheim, called Hello from Heaven, which I really recommend. It's a story of different people and how they got signs from the other side, and it'll open your mind to all the different ways that people are contacted. That's a really good book to read.
That's a great that's a great point to make, that we might be expecting that we will hear verbal communication like you did from Billy, but it may come in many other ways.
Many other ways, like sometimes I'll be thinking about my mom, right? And all of a sudden on the street, because my mom was pretty sick at the end, I'll see someone with the exact same hair as her, really old and walking with a walker, and from the back she'll look just like my mom, right? And I know it sounds silly, but I know somehow that's connected to my mother. Or, you know, I'll be thinking of her, and I'll turn on the radio, and a song will come on that was like our song, or that we sang together. You know, it's like, but when those things happen, people go, no big deal. But it is a big deal. And the more open you are to letting them affect you, the more you'll notice them.
I love that. And just not being attached to how that will come to you, being open to whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, with Billy, with the proofs, I could never have anticipated anything that he did. You know, it was always a surprise. So, like the other day, right? I was been going through this thing, and I have a project I'm working on, a music thing, and the singer quit, and I was so upset, and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm walking in the street, and on the street, there's a little pink, what do you call it? It's like a child's headband with like a little bow on it, like a little fairy headband that a little girl would wear.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it was from Billy, because he always sends me these little girl princess type things, right? And I knew that it was going to be okay when I saw that. It was like, oh, there it is, and everything did work out. You know, for the first year after he died, I found balloons everywhere, like Mylar balloons with different things on it, and especially the day that I learned that the book was actually going to be published, right? That day, before I knew, I got like a Minnie Mouse balloon. So, you know, and it kept being the same kind of balloons, so I kind of realized that was a sign. So, yeah, just be open to the magic, but when it happens, let it in, right? Let it affect you.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love the Minnie Mouse balloon.
Oh, yeah, I still have it in my closet.
That's really great. Well,
yeah.
The last question, we're kind of ending on a not such a significant question, but This person wonders what version of the Swan of Tuonela, I think that's by Sibelius, the composer Sibelius.
Yeah,
is
Sibelius.
That right?
You know,
Sibelius?
I don't have a particular one. I just YouTube it and see what comes up. I think even more important than the Swan of Tuonela is Mahler's Eighth Symphony, Chorus Mysticus. Oh my God, that piece of music, that's what I really listen to. So if you want to have a taste of the other dimensions beauty, listen, you know, just YouTube Chorus Mysticus from Mahler's Eighth Symphony, and you will have quite a transportive experience. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Beautiful. So I'm going to listen to that after we hang up.
Yes, please do.
I wanted to ask you one last thing. I know that Billy took you far and wide and deep into other realms available, but do you still have a sense that there are vast mysteries out there that Billy couldn't even share with you, that maybe your own awareness was limited in a way, that there's far more to discover?
Great question. That's such a great question. Thank you for asking me that question. Yes, because even going as far as I went was so disorienting. One of the reasons that we don't write another book, or if I did write another book, it would be commenting on the things that are already in the first book, is that Billy has said it would be so hard on me. It would be so beyond my comprehension to go there and interpret that he kind of doesn't even want to do it to me. That's the truth. The only thing that he has told me is there's extreme orderliness. So one thing I try to do to make myself feel better in all situations is I try to keep my environment very orderly. Okay, which always makes me feel better. And the other thing that he says is, I'm with my people. I think he means his tribe, where he belongs,
Yeah.
Completely at home. But actually, I think it's very kind that he's not, and I'm very grateful, honestly, that he's not expecting me to go even further than I went, because I think it would be too much.
And really, through this book, he's given all of us a lot to learn and explore already. Like, there's already so much material there.
My God, there is. And if I was ever going to do anything, I would elaborate on that, but I don't really want to go any further. I'd rather live in the mystery, as we said before.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, Annie, this has just been such a fun conversation. I want to thank you so much. I know that you don't do these interviews very often, so I'm really grateful that you took the time to sit down and talk to me.
Well, I couldn't resist you, Karen.
Well, I'm excited.
It's nice for me. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm so excited. I'm excited to share this with everyone who read the book already, but also those who might have passed up the book, who will now realize they need to read this book. It's a very important book, so I'm excited.
Yeah, it's an experience. People tell me it's not just a book. It's like they have an actual experience. And so many people talk to Billy. I mean, people feel like they're friends with him. He's guiding them. People have their own trip going on with Billy. So I'm very happy about that.
Oh, that's amazing. He's become all our brothers in a way.
He is.
So
He is.
nice.
He's here, really, really for everyone. And yeah, it certainly is a big mystery in my life. This whole thing happened, right? The last thing I ever expected. So we don't know what's coming, but we have to just make the best of it. Make the best of what happens to us.
Yeah.
That's another thing he's always telling me. Just take small little steps and do the next best thing you could do for yourself. That's what he tells me when things get really difficult. It's like, just do the next best thing. That's all you have to do. And breathe.
Perfect. Well, as soon as we hang up, I'm going to listen to Chorus Mysticus from Mahler's Eighth Symphony. Thanks for reminding me about that.
Yeah, you must. It's so beautiful. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're so welcome.
It's been a long time since I've shared, so.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. And I know everyone's going to enjoy listening to this. So take care, Annie.
You too. Thank you again, Karen.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Annie Kagan about her book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers. I really enjoyed talking with her, and especially hearing the messages that Billy had to share with her, the wisdom that he shared from the afterlife, from the other side. Many of his teachings really correlated with the messages I feel led to bring here as well. So I think that's, of course, why I enjoyed it so much. For one thing, Billy saying that there's really only love on the other side. There isn't judgment, there isn't punishment, there's just love. And that the only thing he's capable of feeling now toward her and her family and everyone else on this planet is love. And I found that very reassuring and very heartening to hear. But then also Billy's advice for living, to remember to just be yourself and not let anyone else tell you who you should be or how you should live, but strive just to be true to yourself and be who you really are. Also, his emphasis that we should enjoy everything as much as possible while we're here. I truly believe that, even though I'm not always very good at doing it, I truly believe that that's one of the lessons we need to work on, is figuring out, how do I find as much joy as I can in each and every experience that I have here on earth. And then Billy also mentioned, don't compare yourself to others. And I think that's a powerful message for all of us to hear today, especially because of social media, as we discussed, and the tendency there to look at the intimate details of everyone else's life and assume that other people either have it easier or better than you do, or to even assume that other people are better people than we are. I think it's so important for us every day to remind ourselves that it doesn't matter what anyone else's journey is about. You are here on your own journey. And so focus on that. Learn what you came here to learn. Be the best person you can be. So I hope you found these messages helpful. Go get the book and read it if you feel inspired to at all. It was a really wonderful read. I enjoyed it a lot. Also, I just wanted to remind you that you'll find links for everything we discussed in this conversation, such as Mahler's Eighth Symphony, The Swan of Tuonela, also the book she mentioned, Hello from Heaven. All of those links you'll find in the show notes for this episode, EOLUpodcast.com, episode number 226. So you can go there if you're interested in learning more about any of the things we discussed. And remember, too, that there will be a new episode next Monday, and we're coming to the very end of 2019 quite rapidly here. So next week we will have kind of a brief look back at this year and the past decade, actually, because we're at the end of a decade as well, and a little look forward of some of the things I think we should be focusing on for 2020. So until next week, remember that we are here for love. So face your fear, be ready for whatever comes your way, and love each and every moment of this precious life. Bye-bye.